You are listening to the Go Get Them show. This is a discussion that inspires entrepreneurs to pursue their passion to create meaningful, impactful, and sustainable companies in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. This is your host, Arun Krishnakumar, together with my co-hosts, Maxon T and Sheila Amburu. We sit down with entrepreneurs, operators, and investors across frontier markets to discover their experiences, lessons learned, and how they make an impact so you can too.
US. I think about mobile devices and the ubiquitousness of the backbone in some of these countries. We're very archaic here in the US relative.
People that want least change, unfortunately, are the ones that are in position of power to supervise that change.
Cool. So for this episode, we have Amie Patel. So Amie Patel is the managing director of Elevar Equity, an impact investment firm since 2006, focused on low-income communities in emerging markets, particularly India and Latin America. Elevar invests in early and growth capital in entrepreneurs and businesses that directly correlate with high impact and returns, democratize essential products and services for over 30 million low-income households in India and Latin America, and catalyze billions of dollars of capital into 40 plus companies. Elevar have some of the most amazing portfolio companies that include Favo, Justo, Canasta Rosa, Savagram, Credit Justo, Kamatan that recently got acquired by Samunati, Madura Microfinance, Grama VDL Microfinance, Global Gas Peru, Financiera in Mexico. So Amie started a career as corporate finance and investment banking before joining OPIC, now known as DFC, the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation. She subsequently spent about 5 years at Soros Economic Development Fund as an investment officer before joining Imprint Capital as a director of emerging markets. She also spent a year in Goldman Sachs before joining Elevar Equity, working on ESG related investment. Amie holds a BSBA, Finance and International Business from Washington University in St. Louis, and MBA at Georgetown University, the McDonald School of Business. Welcome to the podcast, Amie.
Thank you, Max. It's great to be here.
Cool. Go on. I think Arun, you're on mute.
Yes. I can start with the first question if that's okay. First of all, thanks for making time. What would be great is to understand two significant parts of your career. You've spent 5 years at Soros, and now you've got almost 5 years at Elevar Equity. What keeps you excited about the space? It's clear that you're enjoying your time at Elevar.
Yeah.
So maybe a little bit about that would really help kickstart the conversation.
Yeah, no. So I forayed into this journey of impact investing well before it was even coined, impact investing. Just having this call to action that said, there's got to be something more meaningful to use your finance skills. I developed finance skills in my early part of my career. It's the easiest thing that came to me. But then you'd sit behind a model and you wonder, what does it do? How do we improve lives? How do we impact anything? And we could talk about this a little bit later. I spent some time in Nepal, but through my experience at Soros and now my experience at Elevar, it's really about building something and pushing the envelope and thinking about how to challenge systems, but also figuring out how to elevate the voices of those that are unheard. So I spent some time in Nepal and realized living in a village, you're just at the whim of whatever comes your way. You don't have a voice, and life for a lot of those individuals is really tough. But why does it have to be that way? And so that was just an existential question that I've always had. And I've tried to build a career figuring out how to solve some of those problems and solve some of those questions.
Cool. That's interesting. And just double clicking into, I guess, Elevar's investment focus, wanted to understand, how does it enable you to do some of the things that you want to do? So in the investment focus, you mentioned about India and Latin. I'm from Southeast Asia. So my question will become, why not Southeast Asia? Why specifically, India and Latin? And what's the thinking around it behind the strategy? We'd love to hear more about that.
Sure. So Elevar was rooted through a partnership of 4 individuals that came together. And it was someone from Southeast Asia, someone from India, someone from Latin America, and someone from the US. And they brought with them their networks within those geographies. And the way that we think about building out our portfolio is really starting with finding the right talent, so the right entrepreneurs. And that is network based. If you want to find the quality of entrepreneurs that we're seeking, which is individuals that have 10 to 20 years of real execution experience, someone that's been out there, built or developed that product or solution, maybe for a slightly different socioeconomic class, but having that calling to want to go and solve some of these problems that I was talking about before. And so that's the kind of entrepreneur we're backing. And with that, you need those networks. And so we started in the geographies where we had the strongest networks, and that happens to be India and Latin America. We've been continuously looking at ways to foray into Southeast Asia. So I do think that is part of the future of Elevar. But the last 15 years have been focused on these geographies because that's where we have boots on the ground and individuals with strong connected networks down there.
Awesome. That sounds cool.
Oh, right. So, I mean, I had a question for you. Looking through your career, you've worked with some amazing organizations, TFC, Soros, now Elevar. But what kind of stands out for me from that is your experience in Nepal, actually looking at the Students Partnership worldwide. What did it really entail? Could you share your experiences
Yeah.
there?
So it was a really interesting decision. I was in investment banking right before I decided to go on this venture to Nepal. And I had left investment banking right around the time 9/11 happened. So the whole world was slightly upside down at that point, and I needed to just do something different. So I went from investment banking to a nonprofit and worked in the office and fell in love with the mission of Students Partnership Worldwide. And I think now it's called Rested Development or something similar to that. The mission was to take volunteers and pair them up with local volunteers from the community and have them go into villages or areas within different geographies. I picked Nepal because it was the closest geography to India. And having lived and born and raised in the US, I'd never spent any time in South Asia. So it was almost like a journey of where did I come from, what was the culture, etc. And it was the most humbling experience of my life. So I spent a year in Nepal. 9 months of that was in a village in a town called Badaria, which is near Lumbini along the border of India and Nepal. And I gained so many perspectives. One, we lived in the village. I lived in a hut that had, clay floors, no air conditioning, 100-degree temperature. I think we would just sit and just sweat because it was just that's the kind of lifestyle that people have to live on the Terai. And worked with the women in the village to understand what their needs were, and brought some appropriate rural technologies like training to them, and also helped in the school to bring some sort of new content around environmental education in English. And it was just a really robust experience. I learned grassroots development and all the terminology that comes with that firsthand. I had no idea of this world around development organizations and sort of how you engage with rural communities. And so that was my experience. And then after that, we traveled around India and sort of learned the differences between Nepal and India, which is also another long conversation of the tensions there. But it was the first experience of how do you bring finance and sort of the know-how of the capital markets and unlock opportunity for these individuals. Like there was a disconnect. They had no access.
And wow, that's really interesting. What are some of the things that it's most counterintuitive that you learn on the ground before you walk into it, right, to something different? What are some of the things that you really, without doing that experience, you wouldn't have known about it?
That they know how to solve a lot of problems, and they actually have more insights on the way the world works. And they're not looking for a handout. They're really looking out for ways to build themselves up. They just need better access. They have aspirations. They're discerning. They are no different when they think about what matters to them than someone from a higher class or someone that has all the resources at their hand. So I think there's a lot of creativity that I came across in the village conversations that I would have or with the women. And I think the other thing that was very surprising to me is that all of the problems that they talked about were the same problems that I would hear my mom and her community talk about when I was growing up. So it felt really like, oh, we're just all the same. Like there's no difference. It's just you have this problem and this problem, and so did my parents, and so did my grandmother. And so time is insignificant, because we're all human at the end of the day. And so it's just what you have access to that makes your life easier or better or harder.
Mm-hmm. So the internet myth of first world and third world problem is busted now, because there's no such thing. We all have the same problem. That's really cool. And I think just on that then, based on your experiences, thank you very much for sharing that story. And also based on your 2.5 decades of experience as an investor, what are some of the opportunities that you're seeing now, especially with the world developing and getting closer to technology, with half the world online now? And what are some of the more challenges that comes out of it as well? So what are the opportunities and what are the challenges?
I think there's a whole new set of opportunities coming to surface, because I think more and more people are realizing that the needs of people are not being met. So let's take a distinguishment between wants and needs. We get the privilege of like backing a lot of VC funds and ideas here, but a lot of that is want-based and convenience-based. There's still a significant opportunity set in the world to build business models that focus on needs. And we're talking basic needs, things that you and I kind of have taken for granted: access to education, access to capital, ways to augment your own livelihood. And what we're seeing, and what I've been seeing more and more over the last decade, is that there are actually more entrepreneurs having a call, or executive and professionals having a call to action to do more. And so that talent is starting to come into some of these sectors or thematic areas and bringing their expertise to sort of unlock new solutions, innovation. And I think technology is playing a role in helping them get there faster and figuring out ways to create nonlinear scale, sort of get to the margins that make sense for investors to back. And so, if you think about financial services, there was a plethora of talent maybe 2 decades ago coming into microfinance, thinking about an alternative way of lending. And that has evolved to specialty lending and thinking about how do you back the enterprise side of individuals? How do you think about funding schools? How do you think about funding small businesses? And now we're seeing even more talent coming into solving problems on delivering education, solving the pain points along the healthcare supply chain, the agriculture supply chain. And that's an exciting sort of opportunity set. Challenges are convincing the capital markets that this is not a risky proposition, that this is an area where there is a discerning customer, there's strong aspiration, there is allocation of wallet for these products and services, and that this client segment is actually a better customer and has less risk as a customer, for a lot of reasons. And so needing to spend the time to understand that and take off their biases and allocate more capital. So unlocking that capital in a pace that allows these enterprises to grow.
I was going to ask that question to you, Amie. I mean, I remember our conversation last time, and I was saying we should have a lot of firms like Elevar Equity doing more of investments into social impact. And you said we need more capital markets funds. I mean, capital markets funding coming into this space more actively, and risk returns to be better and understood for these type of opportunities and business models. I'm totally with you on that. So just kind of double clicking into that, what I would like to understand is how entrepreneurs can perhaps think about blended finance, right? Often we see that there is a lack of understanding of how important it is to mix private and public sector capital in an optimal fashion to grow your business. There are certain firms that I have come across that actually focus purely on grants and take a very kind of on the ground approach to growing their business. And on the other hand, we see firms that are actually taking the VC route, which is like grow, 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 pump money, grow, grow, grow. And I'm not necessarily saying one is better than the other, but I almost feel there is a middle ground somewhere which can be a lot more interesting. But what are
Yeah,
your
it's
thoughts on that?
hard, right? One end of the spectrum has a set of donors that are comfortable doing that kind of work. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there are investors that expect 10-year life funds, turn my money 5 years, give me X% return, et cetera. And so as a practitioner in the middle, how do you unlock both sides to have the best result? I think the question everyone should be asking is, who are we doing this for? And it is ultimately the customer and uplifting their lives. And so what are the right mechanisms in order to create a sustainable solution that's well funded, well backed, but solves that problem? So growth comes when you have an affordable product that can meet those demands. When it comes to figuring out the balance between the two worlds, I think my knee-jerk reaction is to say blended finance has so much of a perception around it. It means concessionary, it means complicated structures, long time to unlock value. And so I don't know if we've done an injustice to the industry by making it so complicated, but I think if you've got like-minded partners with an end goal that's common, then the way you use different financial structures can get you there faster. And I think that just requires a smart, focused team to come together to create that structure and make it easy. We at Elevar don't necessarily prescribe to blended finance because it's not what our investors want. I think at a portfolio company level, there would be great ways to work with nonprofits at a deeper level, and it's something that we've continued to look through, but that's something the entrepreneur takes that journey on. And there is some confusion in the space of like, does impact investing, we're trying to just prove ourselves in like all of the ventures that we back, so we don't want anything to come in the way of like saying, oh, well, it's subsidized or it's grant funded. So I just think that there's a lot of complication in this space. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but I don't think it's an easy question to answer. And I don't necessarily know, like private sector investors don't like public sector actors in your business because it's risky. They may not pay, there's regulation, all of those kind of components. And then there's the argument on the impact side, public sector is not doing the work, therefore we have a place to solve the problems. But then what's the long-term solution? So it's a very complicated and layered system. I don't necessarily know if there's a silver bullet on how this gets resolved over the next 10 years.
Sure. So you mentioned about Elevar Equity portfolio companies. If I were an entrepreneur and I'm running a social impact business, how do I access you? What are the things that you're looking for that can help
Sure.
me position for some funding from you?
So we're always looking at entrepreneurs. We're always meeting with them. I think one of the things as an entrepreneur that you want to think about if you're starting this is why. Why do you want to start this venture? How well do you know the customer that you're looking to solve the problem for? And what's the motivation back to you to take on this journey? Because that's going to be one of the first questions that we ask when you come in the door. I also think it's important for entrepreneurs to do their own homework as to who they're looking to have as investors and partners in their own business. So doing homework on us and what other entrepreneurs have experienced as their journey with partnering with us. There's a lot of VC funds out there. There are a lot of early stage capital funders out there. Are they the right ones? Who's aligned with what you want to accomplish is a big part of the journey. And I would say, like, do you have the ambition to really push yourself to want to scale? For us, scale is an important part of the equation. And so do you have the business model that thinks about that? I can get into a little bit of the way we think about what kind of business models we like to back, which I think then gives insights into what kind of entrepreneurs you would attract. So we don't do cross subsidization. We want business solutions that really focus on the underserved customer and solve their pain point at a price point that is continuously affordable for them. So margin expansion isn't at the cost of the customer. It takes place because you're serving more customers and you're finding a solution You're not delivering a product. It's a solution for their livelihood. And that is a big calling, but I think there's a lot of things out there that could get funded and sort of attract our sort of capital to help them grow. Yeah.
So based on that, do you have any examples
Yeah.
of companies that you can talk about? That would be really helpful, because it would be quite interesting to hear the story, starting from how they reach out to you, how you basically go through the whole due diligence process, and ultimately finding the right product market fit for that
Yeah.
specific
I mean, this is one of the
market they're
reasons why I
targeting. It would be
love
quite interesting.
the work that I do,
Yeah.
is because you get to see these really creative ideas come to surface, and then you find the magical entrepreneur that just makes it happen, and the inspiration that comes from that is it's inspired. It's what's it? Addictive. It keeps feeding you. So we've been looking at ed tech solutions for many years now, right? There were several years ago, it was a big boom. Everyone had a content solution to push into schools. And we weren't convinced at that time that was the right timing, right? Being an investor, it's all about timing and getting it right. So we invested in a platform that was funding affordable private schools. So affordable private schools in India is charging a tuition of somewhere around $500 a year. And it's one step up from government schools. And the biggest delta is that there's English taught in the school system. And so that's a very attractive quality for parents who have larger aspirations for their children. So we backed a venture called Varthana, which gave us insights into how the affordable school market works in India. Like, what's the funding needs, revenue cycles, onboarding with anything, content, curriculum, et cetera. What kind of decision making goes behind that? And that gave us an insight into how that ecosystem functions. Several years later, we came across a couple of entrepreneurs that walked into the door and said, "We really think we've got something here that can solve how to improve the education trajectory of these children, and really pushing the envelope on how to get it at a price point where they could reach millions of kids around India." And so we backed this company called Lead School. And Lead School has come out of the gate growing gangbusters because of their ability to really solve school owner pain points across a number of issue items. So it's not just the curriculum, but it's also how you manage your teachers, how you manage the actual school, the infrastructure of the school, like streamlining a lot of those functions, which usually make it messy when you're trying to run a school business. And then sometimes the cost is the actual student's education, right? Because there's all this complexity of running a school. And what Lead does is it comes in and simplifies that entire process while also delivering curriculum that has the intention of improving the trajectory of a school's a child's school grade levels. So we think of their what their educational path will be, and the intention is to improve them by almost 1 to 1.5 grade levels within 1 year of being under a Lead program. And during this last year of COVID in India, given the school shutdowns, et cetera, this team has this amazing leadership structure that said, we need to solve this problem. We need to go online. We need to deliver into homes. And they did it within a week. They converted their entire system within a week. My kids here in New Jersey didn't have a teacher for 3 months that was looking at them through a computer screen. We were doing things like through Google Classroom, but there was no teacher. And so Lead managed to not only do all the curriculum onto a web base, but they also had a teacher. And it wasn't that you needed a Chromebook or a computer. You could just do it on a phone, which most households have. And then they found ways to ensure that they could reach those households that didn't have electronic devices, and sort of brought teachers locally to them. So it's a very localized, community-based solution. And if you think about the impact, we're talking about millions of children that would never have had this access and this advancement had this company not come in and specifically targeted that subset of the population. And the company now is serving over 2,000 schools, and which has a reach of several thousand students, with the ambition to sort of triple the number of schools over the next couple of years. So it's growing, it's exciting, and the team is extremely inspirational in what their ambition is.
Well, that's an amazing story. I mean, the question I have when you explain this is these kind of digital solutions that we typically see, where there's a huge human on the ground angle, but also maybe captured within a digital capsule, if okay. Um, you often find that they're time consuming, sometimes capital intensive. How do you convince your LPs when that kind of return life cycle is needed to capture
Capturing
these
the
kind of
LPs is,
firms and help them grow?
so I would rephrase the question to be, what kind of LPs do we have, and what kind of LPs are we attracting? Um, and the layers, it's a journey. It has been a journey, and a very eye-opening journey for me personally, because I was usually on the other side of the table allocating capital, not on this side of the table looking to seek capital and bring on new partners for the firm. But we have LPs that underwrite us very strictly for impact, figuring out how to align that with maybe their foundation mission and like their program. But then we also have LPs that what I call window dress, where they screen for impact because that's the mandate of the day. But at the end of the day, it's the underwriting is no different than any other traditional manager that's out there. And we have to prove everything from returns to operational due diligence and the backbone, and for some being registered with regulatory bodies, truly buttoned up institutional quality. And then they approve us and then go back to window dressing us as impact. But we do welcome all. The biggest hurdles I have faced is not around the impact thesis. I think there is a learning curve to understand, one, our philosophy on how we build businesses, and also the opportunity set, and a reminder of how large the opportunity set is in these markets. But oftentimes the friction I face is more around the risk within emerging markets and squaring that off with return expectations and the perception of being able to make your money, get it out of the country, some of the basics. And a lot of investors have wounds from like the 80s and 90s that they can't shake, and they don't realize that life is actually better in these markets, sometimes in more functioning than even in the US. Like I think about mobile devices and the ubiquitousness of like the backbone in some of these countries. Like we're very archaic here in the US relative to other markets and how you can do payments, et cetera. And so little things like that don't necessarily translate into investors. The other challenge that I think that a lot of us face is having to feel the need that there are no mistakes, because we're continuously trying to prove that the impact space is the way to go. And so there's a higher level of scrutiny on our track record. And did you do this right? Is this really going to be the consistent way you go forward? And that, I think, I'm not sure a lot of other managers face, because they have the brand name that carries more weight than necessarily the performance behind it.
Cool. I think it's really interesting. Sorry, Aaron, do you want to go on?
No, I just wanted to ask the last question, but I'll let you finish and then we'll
go on.
Okay. So, I mean, a last question for you, and thanks for your patient answers so far. What is it that excites you most about the future of impact investing with your journey in at Elevar Equity? What is it you're looking forward to the most?
So it's still, this is a really interesting question because there's a lot of work to do. I think this COVID pandemic in the US has raised a lot of people's awareness of not just domestic problems, but global problems, things that, were easy to forget when it was the heyday of the life. So I think there's like a much larger call to action that's coming to play. And for me personally, if I think about the next 10 to 15 years of my career, it's being at a place like Elevar where it is being entrepreneurial and building more and convincing people that there's more work to do, that there's a great amount of opportunity. And so that's truly what excites me, is that helping Elevar gain more capital to put more capital to work and actually get it into the hands of people that can make the world a better place.
I know it's the last question, but I think I'm going to ask this. I'm going to be a little bit negative and ask, what are you most pessimistic about, and how can we do something to change that?
So what I'm most pessimistic about are a couple things. Because we're humans, all of us, at the end of the day, we have habits. I'm nervous that everyone falls back into a world where they don't feel the need to change because it's easier. I'm also nervous that there'll be a disproportionate amount of money allocated to energy and environmental solutions, and people forget that there are individuals that still need to live day to day. And until you uplift them, you're going to face a much bigger battle on the energy and the environment side. If people are still struggling to have better access, they're the ones that are going to strain the earth more than just investing in infrastructure. So there's that debate on where capital is flowing within the impact space. And I'm nervous that political decisions in these countries, like the lack of leadership, continues to keep instability, which keeps capital from flowing.
Understood.
Because people are risk off.
Yeah, that's a very good thing to remind ourselves, right? To understand a little bit better, right? ESG, everything is equal, right? Not just one over the other. We have to speak with our capital allocation as well. I guess with that, thank you so much, Amie. One last thing: if someone wants to reach out to you, they want to look for funding, want to understand a little bit more in this space, where can they reach out?
So you can look on our website and learn more about us at elevarequity.com. And I am very approachable. So you can just email me, and it's Amie, AMIE, at elevarequity.com. And we will start a conversation.
Cool. Thank you very much, Amie. This is great.
Thank you. Thanks so
Cheers,
much.
Amie. Thank
Great
you so much.
conversation. Thanks.